Today, it's all about the brakes on our Acura TSX. Welcome back to the Auto Obsessive Garage. Chadwick with you again for another installment of Project Budget VTech Daily. That is our 2008 Acura TSX. Today, guys, we're gonna do a full brake job on the car. I'm gonna be pretty detailed on this one. We're gonna be doing pads, rotors, and fluid. So let me show you guys how to do that. Let's get in the garage, get a little dirty. First step in doing the brakes is take the wheels off, 19mm. Of course, we got our handy jack stand behind here, which we'll be resting the caliper on shortly. But the first step is actually taking off these two little Phillips screws here. Now, Honda loves these things. They actually hold the rotor to the hub, which is useful when you're putting it back on and putting all your brake hardware on. But these things can be a living nightmare if they rust on there or over torqued down or stripped out. You'll drill these out and it adds a lot of time to a brake job. But get a good Phillips screwdriver out, these diamond tip ones. Make sure you get a good grip there. There we go. One loose. Ah, there we go. Whew. Not bad at all. I think these brakes have been serviced recently. Now, if you guys are wondering, well, going back to my intro video, you saw that I said, hey, these brakes look good, I don't need to do them. After some highway driving, I did have to hit my brakes in kind of an emergency fashion the other day, and there was quite a bit of vibration at highway speed. So there's some slight warping going on, and for me, I just don't like to live like that. Sure, I can make them last a long time. There's plenty, and I mean plenty of pad life left, but for me, when something's warped, especially a rotor, why bother? I hate the feeling of that, and I want my brakes to be as good as they can, so we're replacing these. So those two screws removed. We're gonna take the actual caliper off. Two 14mm bolts will do that for you. And before you take those two 14mm bolts off, get a 12mm. There's a bracket up here secured in place that's holding the brake line. You want to take that bolt off, that's right there, that 12mm bolt, and that'll allow you to move the brake caliper a lot more. If not, it's pretty restrictive. So about taking our time with this job, and you can see now that brake line's free. Okay, with that 12mm and your brake line nice and free, you're going to need a couple things to take these bolts off that hold the caliper to the bracket. You need a 19mm to hold this nut that wants to rotate. And you're gonna put your 14 on the back, and that's how we're gonna take them off. Then you get those two 14mm bolts off. Caliper should be free to be pulled from the car. Kind of work it off of the pads. Go ahead and set that back on your jack stand out of the way a little bit. You can kind of hook it right through there is one of the best ways to hold it. Now we can check out our pads. Again, a lot of life on them. They do look a little old, little crusty, but tons of life. But still, that rotor is not doing well. Well, at least one of these rotors, probably multiples. So we're gonna switch it out with some known good brand new hardware. Pull the pad off the back. Pretty even wear, so that's a good sign. Now to remove this caliper bracket, it's gonna be a 17mm socket. You got two bolts, one up high, one down low. There are two 17mm caliper bracket bolts. Caliper bracket will just pop right off. Of course, we're gonna be cleaning this up with wire brushes and brake clean soon enough. We can't put this back together ugly. Now we gotta retract that caliper piston. Super easy on these fronts. It's just a simple C-clamp for me. And I'll reuse that rear facing brake pad and push it against the piston, and that's the best way to do it. Now would actually be a perfect time. I've already done it. I didn't show you though. Go ahead and pop the cap on your brake reservoir under the hood, and that'll allow any fluid to come out because we are going to create more pressure in the system with this act right here. So put some paper towels around it because it will spill over. You just got to twist this thing and push that piston all the way back in. All right, didn't have far to go because these pads look so good. Now, if your pads are really old, it's going to take a lot longer. But you can see there the piston is flush with the back of the caliper here, so that's good. At this time, we can actually go ahead and pull this old rotor off. There is a line right there, but who knows? Maybe these were turned. I don't know the full story, but they're not good. So off they come. I also like to get in there with some brake cleaner when everything's off. Oh, in case you guys were wondering for the budget build, I don't cheap out on brakes. I like to use a good mid-grade or premium grade. I like these Power Stop Evolution series pads and rotors. They really work well, last a long time, really good feel, good bite, initial bite, and they're pretty good against fading. Now, maybe not perfect for track day, but for daily driver, this is the stuff to go with. There we go. And that's exactly the first thing we're gonna do is put those screws back in place to hold our rotor from flying around. Make sure you're not cross-threading these when you put them in, so you wanna hold that rotor as flat as you can. And these don't really have to be really torqued down, guys, come on. Let me get the wire wheel out and work this thing over, because we're not gonna put this stained old nasty caliper bracket on there. Let's go ahead and clean it up. And we pulled the old hardware off. We're gonna be putting fresh hardware on these calipers, obviously. So get a wire brush. I like to use a brass brush for this. Just kind of work it over. Don't take the finish off, you know, just enough to get all this old brake dust loosened up, and obviously you can use some brake clean. Okay, we're upgrading from the toothbrush method. We're gonna use a drill and a wire wheel here, and of course, iPro, guys. Now that's more like it. Not perfect, but a little more shine. Gonna look nice on there. Speaking of looking nice, let's go ahead and put this caliper bracket back on. Now it's time to put our brake hardware on. Time for our new brake pads. Obviously the one with the little noisy thing that loves to squeal when it gets low goes in the back. But we want to crack open our Power Stop grease here for our brake components. And we're going to put just a little bit on these ears. I like to call them the ears of the brake pad. And now before we even think of putting that caliper back on, our sliding pins definitely need a re-grease. It's worth looking into every time, so carefully pry that rubber boot off. These are very pliable. This car's been very well maintained, guys, and I won't be surprised by, yep, grease being on the slider pins. Now, a lot of times these dry out over time, and your calipers can get sticky. That's a very bad condition, and they can cause the brake pads and rotors to warp and wear down your brake pads, all that fun stuff that comes along with that. So let's clean this old grease off, put some new grease on, but again, this car was maintained. I'm not surprised. Again, nice clean slider pin there. And we're going back to our Power Stop brake lubricant here. And go ahead and slide that pin back in. Now you might get a little air in it. You might have to separate the boot in there. Push that air out, there we go. And don't forget to do the bottom one. Now next up on our list is putting the caliper back on, but we're gonna hit that with, of course, our wire wheel. Get that cleaned up first. After spending too much time with a wire wheel, time to put our caliper back on. Obviously, if yours is really crusty, it needs to be sanded all the way down. Go ahead and give it a fresh coat of paint. I do that often on my projects and it comes out great, but you should have plenty of room now to slide this right over your brand new pads. Line it up with your sliding pins. And don't forget our 12mm bolt that holds this little bracket on to this little brake line. Last but not least, with everything tightened down, I want to give it a nice coating of brake clean, just because I got my grubby fingerprints over everything. Zoom in on that good action. Look at that, guys. That is a super clean brake job. New rotor, new pads, and here we are at the rear of our Acura TSX. This is the passenger rear to be exact. Very similar stuff we did to the front to do the brakes. Couple changes, a couple different tools we'll need, but I'll show you when we get there. First off, our friends, these little Phillips head screws. It's not a good sign. That one's a little damaged. That one came out. Oh, this is gonna be a problem, isn't it? All right, let's try to drill this bad boy out. I don't have my good bits with me. They're at my house for another home improvement project. So this is gonna be fun using this other bit, but let's see, he might have the stuff. There we go. That was a pain in the butt. You know, I had to mention that that happens, and then of course, it happens. So we should be good now, at least only one of them. Let's continue our brake job. All right, first step is the brake line. Again, has a bracket holding it pretty tight. You want to loosen that bracket up. There's a 12mm bolt. It's right behind here, right behind the knuckle. And you want to get that off of there. That way you have that extra slack in the line. You can also see we have our handy dandy jack stand in place to rest our caliper on. Now to take out the caliper itself, it's 12mm again. Now again, like the fronts, there is a locking kind of nut. It's actually just at the end of the sliding pin here. You want to hold that down with a 17mm. There's those 12mm caliper bolts. Now we can take our caliper off. Pull it off over these pads. Sit it back there in our jack stand. Pull our old pads out. You can see they're old looking, but they're not really worn down. Lots of meat left, but again, the rotor kind of looks a little rough, not gonna lie. It's all coming out anyway. So get these off of there. Pull the hardware off the brackets now. Pretty old, crusty looking. What we can do actually now is go ahead and get these slider pins out. Same as we did in the front. And again, yeah, still got some grease on there. A little old looking, but still, they are greased. Let's get that 14mm working. Caliper bracket bolts removed. Pull the caliper bracket right off. Of course, we're going to clean it up with a wire wheel like we did in the front. Old rotor, right off. Little brake clean shower. Okay, for the next section, guys, you are going to need some specialty tools. You can get yourself one of these on Amazon. It's a brake caliper tool kit. It's a tool set with all the various brake caliper resetting things you need for doing rear brakes. As you can see here, there's a little cross pattern you can see in there. So you can't just push this in, nor should you try that. You can actually damage the caliper if you do that. I'm going to show you guys what you need to do, because you need to push it in at the same time as twisting another tool. So this kit's pretty cheap. You don't need to go all out. You don't need to buy some brand name stuff. Again, I'm showing you guys this is a budget build, and if you're going to work on cars at all, you need yourself a kit like this. So many cars need this, and this is what you're getting inside. Standard issue, regular tools. These are what we'll be using, and I'll show you that. And these are just an assortment of different fittings that allow you to do different brakes for different cars. So not expensive at all. Get yourself one of these guys. Pays for itself in the long run. We are on the right hand of the vehicle, the passenger side. So we're going to be using the right hand tool. And this is the tool that fits right in these crosses. You want to find what it, like little add-on tool here. Fits in there perfectly. You then have this that looks just like a pad. A really thin pad, albeit. We're going to put that right over here. And this is how we're going to reset this caliper, guys. So you're going to fit it in there. And this is hard to show because there's not a ton of room back here. So you're going to line everything up. You want to pull out, there's this other weird piece of brake hardware for these ones. Right there. It's kind of a pain in the butt to get that little piece out. Get him out of there. Okay. Now we're ready to do this. You're going to put this in like this. Put those two little prongs in the little lines there. Get it perfect. And then you can tighten this part here to get it nice and cinched up nice and tight. Once you get that nice and tight, you can turn this and it will actually push in the piston and turn it at the same time, which is what needs to be done with these rear brakes. A lot of cars are like this, so again, this tool is highly necessary. Also, just an alert, make sure your e-brake is off before you start this job. Now we're just going to push that in. And every once in a while, just keep tightening that so you have pressure. And we're going to push that in all the way until, again, the piston is flat with the back of the caliper. Pulling that off, you can see the caliper is pretty much firm there. Go ahead and set it back on your jack stand. And it's time to put this back together. Got our brand new power stop rotor. A little bathy bath on both sides. Don't worry, we'll be cleaning it even more. we go. I've only got the one screw. I used to have a bunch of spare of these screws. Sometimes I don't even use them because I just hate them that much. But we can go ahead and put that screw back in to hold this rotor on. Again, guys, no worry to panic. This not having both in is not an issue. You could run it without. Trust me, I've done that. Get my greasy fingerprints off of this nice clean rotor. The bracket isn't gonna fly either. Let's go ahead and hit it with the wire wheel. Time to put our cleaned up caliper bracket back on. Time to re-grease these old caliper pins. Time to put some fresh brake hardware on here too. And again, remember, we're putting a little bit of lubricant on the ears of the brake pads. So you gotta put this hardware up in the caliper before you put it back on, and it's kind of a pain in the butt to squeeze it in there. You gotta pinch it in and then you can slip it up in there. So now we gotta slide this caliper back over. And the rear brakes are down on our Acura TSX. Now we're under the hood of our TSX, and the final part of our brake job is doing the fluid. Got all that shiny hardware on there. How can we use old fluid? It's just not right. So I'm using a motive power bleeder, now on a budget. Obviously, two-person method works where you have someone pumping the brakes, someone breaking open the bleeders. But since I'm solo in the garage, I'm a loner dotty, a rebel, I gotta do this by myself. So I'm gonna pressurize this to around 15 PSI. I find that to be enough. And then I'm gonna work my way around all the calipers, opening them, letting all the old stuff out. If there's any air in the system, which I don't think there is, but any of that old fluid will bleed all the way out. Obviously, you go from the furthest away from where the brake master is, and on this vehicle, the longest line is the passenger rear. Then we'll do driver rear, passenger side, then front side, driver side. And that's it. And we'll be fully bled, fresh fluid in the system. So let's pressurize the system and make sure we're not leaking. 15 PSI, everything seems to be holding. Let's go to the passenger rear, crack that bleeder valve open and show you guys what we're working with. Well, that's really informative. My battery died mid-recording, so that's cool. As you can see, we're already bleeding the rear brake caliper, passenger side. Now, all you need to do that is pop off that little rubber cap. I've got a cool little clear hose going into a bottle, which I'll show you in a second here, and it's a little 10mm wrench. You just break that little bleeder nipple valve open and let this stuff pour out till it starts to come out clear. Once you're happy with the condition of it coming out, you can go ahead and close this back up. And we did a few turns, so we just got to keep doing that. Pull off your little bleeding hose and let that fluid just drain right into your container. Alright, here's what I got out of that one. So you can see very dark fluid. Next step, we're going to do the driver's side rear, then the passenger side, then the driver's side front. But yeah, get all this nasty fluid out of there. Clearly make sure this is all tightened up. Put your little rubber cap back on. We're going to check the motive power bleeder under the hood, make sure we still have plenty of pressure. Onto the passenger rear. I'll catch you guys again at the driver's side front when we're finishing this up. All right, this is it, guys. The driver's side front, the final caliper to bleed. Slide our bleeder hose on. Make sure we have a nice tight fit. All pressurized under the hood. Let's go ahead and crack this loose, shall we? Here we go. I'll get that dark fluid out of there. Let's go. And once that fluid is nice and clear that's coming out, it's time to go ahead and seal that back up. And check out our fluid, guys. We got a pretty big container here just full of very darker than motor oil brake fluid. Now, brake fluid is nearly clear, so keep that in mind when you're looking at this. This is some old fluid. Even though our brake hardware did look pretty nice, visual inspection isn't everything. There's a good bet that that hardware was probably on there a little longer than it looked, and no one did the fluid recently, so Good catch, these brakes are gonna be so nice. Just a little low on fluid, so I'm gonna top it off with some quality Doc 4 brake fluid. And there we have it, guys. All new brake hardware on our Acura TSX, all new brake fluid. This thing's ready to stop. Obviously, I'm gonna go bead the brakes in, do a couple stopping maneuvers there, as recommended by the brake manufacturer. And this thing's gonna be awesome. It's gonna stop well, and the brakes are gonna last a long time. So, brake job complete.